Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Angel, and today we're going to be doing some more Christmas DIYs. I found these little wood plaques at my thrift store, and they have these little ceramic pieces on the fronts of them. So I'm just going to use some white chalk paint and do a couple coats over top of those to cover it. I did leave the wood backing because I really liked it. I liked the warm dark brown. So I'm just carefully going in and just painting those ceramic pieces. Then I grabbed these Nutcracker napkins that I got off of Amazon, which I am absolutely obsessed with. I think they are just so cute, and I kind of liked how it already had the collage on the napkin, so I thought I would just do that over the ceramic pieces. For the first one, I chose to center the Mouse King and just use some Mod Podge, and then carefully put this down and kind of pat it down with my fingers to get the wrinkles out, and then I'll go back over it with another layer of Mod Podge. For the second one, of course, I decided I needed a Nutcracker on here, and I liked this one particularly because it had the grandfather clock on this part of the napkin. So I'm just Mod Podging it down to that ceramic piece. Once these were dry, I was able to just sand off the excess napkin, and then to finish them off, I'm just going to be using some gold velvet ribbon and tying little bows at the top of these. For this project, I wanted to make a vintage dummy board, but I wanted to make it Victorian. So I found this Victorian Santa image off of the Graphics Fairies website, and I just ended up having it printed off on a 16 by 20 little poster from Walgreens. I'm just going to start by cutting this Santa Claus image out. Now, I'm doing it pretty close to him, but in certain areas like the Christmas tree and around the greenery on his hat, I'm not really concerned about getting it super close, but for the rest of it, I'm just trying to get into all those little details and cut this out as close as possible. Now, I did mess up on this just a little bit because down by his feet, instead of cutting it so close to his boots, I should have left some of that snow-covered ground around his feet. Once I had him all cut out, then I just grabbed a foam board piece from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use some white school glue just to glue that Santa to the poster board. I don't recommend using Mod Podge for this because it will bubble up a little bit, and the white school glue just seems to work a lot better. Also, I highly recommend using a foam brush to spread that white glue all over the poster board, just so it's a little thinner and there's not clumps of glue everywhere. Once I had him glued down, then I'm going to let that dry for a few hours, and I did place some heavy books on top of it just to make sure everything stayed put. Then I'm going to use an X-Acto knife, and I'm just going to cut this Santa out of that foam board. This part does take a little bit of time and a lot of patience, but I also wanted to mention, if you don't want to do this whole process of cutting him out twice, you can actually get these printed off on board prints from Walgreens as well, and they're not too much more expensive than just getting a print, and usually they have like 50% off or 60% off of their board prints. Now, I obviously needed this dummy board to stand up, so I just grabbed some of that excess poster board I had left over, and I cut out 2 little triangle pieces that are the exact same size, and I'm gonna glue these onto the back of the Santa just like you see here to make a stand for this. So as you can see, I'm kind of leaning that piece over a little bit, and then I'll take my glue gun and go down each side of each of these pieces. For this project, I'm going to be using this little wood sign. I got this at the thrift store, and apparently I painted it a while back. I have no idea what I was going to use it for, but I thought this would be a perfect longer sign to do a raised texture nutcracker on. So as you just saw, I traced out a nutcracker from my computer, and then here I'm just laying down some of my carbon paper. Then I'll tape that nutcracker on top of the carbon paper and use the little tool that came with the carbon paper to just trace over this nutcracker. So that's going to leave a little template on this sign for me so that I can turn this into a 3D kind of nutcracker. You see here I've got some Dollar Tree spackling, and then I'm just adding a little bit of white paint to one of those little cups, and then for the other one I'm just doing a creamy color for his face and his hands. Now you're going to want to add paint or add a little more spackling depending on how thick this is. You don't want it to be super runny, but also if it's too thick, it's going to be very difficult to spread this around. But as you see here, I'm starting with his hair, and I'm just using small paint brushes and dipping it into that spackling and paint, and then I'm just pushing this around on the nutcracker to fill in his hair. And then here I am going in on his face and doing the exact same thing. Now, if your spackling and paint combination does start to stick a little bit to your paintbrush, or it's not moving around easily, you can add a little bit of water. So once I finished his hair, his face, and his hands, then I mixed up a little more spackling, this time with some of my metallic antique gold paint, and that's what I'm going to use for his shirt and his boots. And then I mixed up some spackling and black acrylic paint to use for his pants and his hat. Now for his shirt and his pants, boots, and hat, this combination that I did was a little bit thinner than the combination I did for his face and his hair, and that was just so it made it a little easier to spread this around in his shirt and then filling in those pants. So I really didn't have a place to stop his pants. I just decided where to stop them, and then like I said, I filled in his boots part with that antique gold. I also decided to use the antique gold right at the tip of his hat, and then I just filled in the rest of his hat with the black combination. And again, like I said, this is super easy. You just kind of put some down and then push it around with your small paint brushes. Now, once he was all filled in, then I let this dry overnight, and the next day I realized that using the spackling kind of dulled down that gold color. So I just decided to go in and paint over his shirt and his boots and the little tip of his hat with my antique gold color. And at this point, you could definitely just leave this as is, but I did want to add a few more little details to him. So I added a couple lines over top of his boots, and then now I'm going in with a really small paintbrush and some black paint, and I'm just doing a separation between his shirt and his arms. And then of course I'm going to add a little belt for him. I also decided that I wanted to paint his shoulders black, And I added in some tassels after I painted these in, but I ended up not liking that. So I did paint back over that with the antique gold. I also added a little diamond shape on his hat with the antique gold, and then decided to draw in some more little lines at the bottom of his sleeves. And then finally, to finish him off, I just added some little black buttons on his jacket. I have been dying to make over this little Santa and angel statue. This was my grandmother's that my mom gave to me, and unfortunately Santa was a little bit broken. He apparently used to hold something in his hand, but it had broken off, so I did have to sand that down a little bit. And then I don't know if you can tell or not in the video, but this does have a lot of glitter on it, so it was impossible to clean up and make look good again. Plus, a lot of the paint was kind of chipped off. So my plan for this was just to go in and give everything a nice fresh coat of white chalk paint. Now, my plan was to keep their hair, their faces, their hands the same, just paint the white over everything else. But unfortunately, with all the small little spaces and crevices, it was kind of impossible, and I did end up getting white chalk paint on their hair and their faces. So I do end up having to go in and fix all of that. But first, I wanted to change the blue color that was on the edges and in a few more spots. I wanted to change that to gold. So I'm just using some metallic antique gold to do all of that. And then here you see me fixing their hair, and I actually decided to use the antique gold on the blonde little girl, and then for the little brunette or redheaded little girl, I used copper metallic paint. And then of course, like I said, I had to go back in and fix their hands and their faces where I accidentally got paint on them. So I just redid everything on here. And then if you remember, I said Santa had at one point been holding something, and when I sanded his hand down, I noticed that there was a tiny little hole in the top of his hand. So I just decided I would add in a little bottle brush tree from Dollar Tree. For this project, I'm going to be using a 16 by 20 canvas. I just got this one from Dollar Tree from their plus section, but I'm going to take a razor and cut this canvas off and then cut off those side pieces to make them nice and straight. Now, I am going to be painting on this, so I do have an issue of not being able to make things very straight. So I'm just using a little measuring tape and marking the center of the top and the bottom. And we're just going to be painting a really simple Christmas tree on here. Everyone can do this. I'm just taking a little round brush and doing the trunk of the tree first with some brown paint. And I'll go back in and fill that all in once I have the line drawn. So then I'm just going to darken up my green color a little bit by adding a tiny bit of black and some of that brown. And I'm just going to go for it and just start making little tree branches. I highly suggest starting at the bottom. That way you can start with your larger branches and then just work your way up and make your smaller ones, and they don't have to be perfect. These are a little bit wiggly here and there, some pointing up, some pointing downward a little bit. But once I had the basic tree branches on here, then I'm gonna go right back in using the same brush with that same color, and I'm just gonna make some more little branches coming off of my first branches. Then I'm gonna switch over to a tiny little liner brush, and I'm gonna go back in again with that same color and just make teeny tiny little pine needles coming off of all of those branches. I'm gonna let this tree completely dry, and then here I'm going back in just with a little bit of metallic antique gold paint, and I'm gonna make a little star on the top of the tree. So then I decided I wanted to add real ornaments to this tree. So I grabbed these little ones from Dollar General. You can also grab these same size ones at Dollar Tree, but I'm gonna take some white thread and a needle, and I'm gonna thread it through the little cap on these, and then I'm just gonna tie a couple knots to secure the thread. Now this might sound a little bit confusing, but this is really simple. Once I had the thread secured on the little ball, then I'm just gonna push it through the canvas on one of those branches, and at this point, you can just tie it off on the back, but I wanted to make sure these were extra secure. So after I pushed it through to the back, then I pushed it back to the front, wrapped it through the cap of the little ball again, tied a knot, and then pushed it back through the back again. And then once I had it on the back side again, I cut the thread and then tied a few more knots. Hopefully that's not too confusing. And like I said, you can just push it through the canvas one time and then tie a knot. But here I'm just showing you a little close up how I push it back through the canvas to the front, wrap it through the cap, and then just use the needle to wrap it through the thread and tie another knot. So once I had all my ornaments secured to the tree, I'm gonna flip this over and kind of fold over the edges to make them a little bit nice and neat with some hot glue. Then I really just wanted this to look like an old tapestry kind of hanging. These were really popular in the Victorian era. So I'm actually going to use some of this 1-inch gold velvet ribbon, and I'm going to go around all the edges of this, but I'm starting at the bottom and making sure that I leave just a little bit on both sides so that I can glue that to the back side. Then when I cut the pieces for the sides, I made sure to leave a little bit more at the top because I want to make little loops to hang this on. So once I had the side pieces glued down, then I'll flip this over and fold over those little loops and hot glue those to the back side. To hang this with, I'm going to be using this thinner velvet gold ribbon. Both of these are from Amazon and they are the exact same color, so this worked out perfectly. But I'm just going to tie one side to one of the loops, stretch it across, and tie the other side. Now the only issue I had was the canvas wanted to bow a little bit when I tried to hang this, so I just used a paint stir stick and glued a little piece to the back of this. And that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.